Welcome. I'm Michael Bickert. Thanks for joining me today as we explore concepts with the objective of improving your management skills and growing your business. I want you to pause the video right now so that you can grab a notepad and a pen, because I want you to make a commitment to yourself that you will jot down something. You will be inspired in some way, whether it's something that comes out of my mouth, something in the concept we discussed today, or even if your mind wanders and you come up with something, you'll jot down something that you can implement in your business today to drive your business forward. And today I want to talk to you about the concept of micromanagement. I was engaged in a conversation recently in which I found myself addressing the issue of micromanagement, and my mind went back to, I don't remember what year it was, but a number of years ago, I went to the World Business Forum in Radio City Music Hall, Manhattan, New York City, and it had a star-studded lineup of business gurus. The star of the show was Jack Welch, at the time, I think he had just retired as the CEO of GE, and he had the distinction of increasing the market capitalization of GE in an astronomical way. And so he was touted as this, amazing superstar business person. And I had just read his book, Winning, and I was really impressed. And there was a great opportunity I had. I was the first one up when they asked if there were questions to the microphone. I was the first one up, and I got to speak to him directly. And without getting into what I said, he said to me that, boy, they're going to start to call you Neutron Jack, which is what they referred to him as. And the crowd laughed and everything. But I digress. There were other people there as well. Of course, Michael Eisner from Disney, Carl Icahn, Garry Kasparov, the great, perhaps the second best chess player in the history of the world. There were lots of other people. Alan Greenspan was there. There were lots of business gurus there. You got to take in all this information. The issue of micromanagement came up when Michael Eisner, he was the CEO of Disney at the time, and he was doing a presentation on all the benefits and extolling the virtues of micromanagement and how Disney's success, and at the time Disney's a very successful company and has been for quite some time, but at the time it was enjoying a great deal of success, much of which was being attributed to Michael Eisner. And he talked about how micromanagement and his approach using micromanagement was to be credited for the success of Disney at the time. And it was a great presentation. I learned a lot. I took lots of notes. And then following him, the next person up to the podium, next person up on stage at the microphone was Carl Icahn, the billionaire investor. And he opened up by saying, the worst thing you could do is micromanage. And the crowd just started laughing because it was just a complete reversal. He was diametrically opposed to what Michael Eisner had presented. And it was interesting to hear how he went up and talked about his success and his companies. He doesn't micromanage at all. So the question is micromanagement a good thing or not? Or can it be depending on who you are? So I wonder if you would find yourself as a micromanager. Do you have a tendency to micromanage or not? And have you found it to be a good thing? Myself, I can tell you I'm a bit of a control freak, and therefore I do have a tendency to micromanage. I have this sort of prevailing belief that I can do things best and my way is the best way. And I tend to want to get my fingers into everything and sort of have some control and some say in how all the various details, right down to the minute, are handled within my organization, within my company, and within organizations that I've managed in the past. Yet, I will tell you that I do not like that. I don't find that to be a particularly endearing quality of mine, and I think it drives my team nuts. And I recognize that it's a liability to me, not an asset. It may be true that, like, for example, I have some skill in writing and composing a document. And so, but I might delegate that a particular document, maybe a standard operating procedure needs to be written, and I might delegate that to somebody, and I can scrutinize that heavily and whatever, and maybe I could have written it better myself. But again, we have to look at, as I have many times in our discussions, what should you be doing, and focusing on your strengths. And the key, I think, let's just back this up a moment here away from my example and define, what is micromanagement. And micromanagement that I'm referring to is, like in my example, where you want to get involved in all of the details, and the details matter to the boss. So what I believe is, of course, there is a difference between personalities. Michael Eisner and Carl Icahn had different approaches, and their personalities and their paradigms and what they were exposed to that led them into their current careers and everything shaped how they view the benefits of how they manage, one micromanagement and one very hands-off and using delegation and so on. So there is personality, of course, but more than that, I think you can attribute the definition, a change in definition, to whether somebody thinks that there are merits to micromanagement or not. I would say that there are benefits to micromanagement from sort of a philosophical point of view of overall that details do matter. And they say the devil is in the detail. I would say that when you consider the impact of small things, you begin to realize there are no small things. The small things matter. And that I've said before that you shouldn't be looking for the magic pill, the magic bullet, whatever, choose your metaphor. You will not find one giant area, an epiphany that you can change your organization and affect massive change. Instead, you can look for incremental improvement all over the place in 1,000 different ways if you can apply improvement. And so all those statements are acknowledging that the details really, really, really matter, and that those who are very successful, that which separates the extraordinary from the ordinary are the minor details, the little things that are consistently practiced. And so from that perspective and framed in that light, you may say, well, then micromanagement matters. But why I would challenge you on that is when you have the definition about your leadership style. As a leader, are you a micromanager? And there's nothing wrong with a leader saying the details matter and teaching his people a culture of focusing on the details and the concept that all the little improvements we can make really do make a difference, and they will be our competitive advantage. But you don't want the boss looking after all those details. You need the boss to delegate and empower his people to look after those details. And so going back to me, what I've noticed is that my tendency, without me even being aware of it, will come out and I'll start to take over. What I've had to do many times is excuse myself from meetings. I go to the meeting, I'll intentionally sometimes arrive late to a meeting that I've been invited to, but I've clarified in advance, and it's like, it's not critical that you're there. We're going to have this objective. We're going to discuss these things. But you're more than welcome to come. And I know myself that I will dominate the meeting. I will take over and I'll start telling people what I want done and what my expectations are and all this kind of thing. So sometimes I will intentionally arrive late so that I'm not really up to speed of what's happening. And then I'll just listen. I'll try to be more of a fly on the wall because I benefit from the knowledge of what's happening, and I can meet with people individually later if I see something going, sort of astray in their management philosophy or the direction they're taking. But if I sit too long and something really, stimulates me inside, then I'll start to take over. If I see a lull in the meeting or people sort of stop and they're stuck on a problem, then I've got to get my 2 cents in. And so I've excused myself many times from the meetings so that I don't do that, because I know it's a tendency that I have, but I don't like it because I truly believe you will get the best out of your organization through empowerment and through decentralization of the various tasks that need to be done. You certainly as a boss can't do it all. And by getting involved in everything, you are sending a message to your people that their ways aren't good enough and that they need to try to emulate you in all that they do. And that is not what I want. It shouldn't be what you want. I've used examples before where I promoted a person to a position that historically had been done in a particular management style, and his personality did not seem to fit that management style. But I knew this guy was a super achiever, and I thought he's going to approach it a different way, and I'm very intrigued to see the way he approaches it. And he did almost everything different than I would have done it and different than his predecessor, but he thrived. He set all sorts of records, and his department was very successful. And there is an example and a life lesson that I had that taught me, let people do things their way. It's okay for it to be different as long as the underlying objectives are well defined, well aligned between the various stakeholders, and as long as they're achieved. So you don't want to get involved and create a culture where your people, unwittingly, you've created a culture rather, unwittingly, that your people think they need to do things your way. And they always go out of their way to try to think, how would Michael do this? I want to do it the way Michael would do it. I have set that up unwittingly myself and tried to dismantle that and said, don't people. So it starts, maybe share this with your people. If you agree with what I'm saying and you have witnessed this in yourself and you've undermined your people and you've unwittingly set up a culture where you're a micromanager and people are just trying to please you as opposed to trying to accomplish the objective in whatever way they best can at their level and using a variety of resources available to them. If you've set that situation up, then you need to communicate to your people, perhaps by sharing this video and saying, I don't want that. I want you to use your skills and I want you to be resourceful and work things out. It's really in your best interest as a manager, as an entrepreneur, as a business owner to do this, because your people will learn, they will grow, they will develop, and they will become far more resourceful. And you will have this culture where it's okay to make mistakes. You'll get more creativity, more innovation. You could just go on and on with how many benefits you'll get from this. And conversely, how many disadvantages there are to setting up a situation where your people are paralyzed for fear of disappointing you or doing it different than you would. And I'm telling you, you're hearing from the expert on the matter. And I say that with all humility because I'm actually, I'm criticizing myself here. It is not a good thing to have where your people want to do everything the way you would do it. It's okay for them to use you and model you as they gain experience, but you don't want them to stifle their own creativity, their own resourcefulness, and collaborating with one another and using their resources. You need that to filter through your entire organization. So again, you share this video and your people can share it with their people, and you say, this is the culture that I want to create within our team, where we do not micromanage and we have permission to remind someone where they're maybe taking control over something that they've delegated or they've assigned responsibility to someone else. So if you're responsible for something, fair enough. But now when you delegate tasks within that overarching responsibility and the project, you want to enable your people to do it as long as your objectives are aligned, the objective is well defined, and they accomplish the objective, you back off and you let them do it. So that's the concept that I would say creates the confusion here about whether micromanagement is good or not. Managing the micro details is very good for the organization to do, but for any individual to do it insofar as he takes over and fails to empower and fails to collaborate and stifles creativity and innovation, it's a bad thing. And that's why I think I saw two great business leaders in Michael Eisner and Carl Icahn completely disagree. I think they define their terms differently at the time. And so ask yourself as a leader within your organization, what are the best practices? How will you communicate to your people? How will you decentralize and get the entire team to collaborate? And what mechanisms do you have in place right now so that other people will contribute and you can back off and let things? It's such a satisfying feeling. It's so gratifying to see your team accomplish tasks and you didn't have to. It's a mistake for you to feed your own ego and your own sense of productivity to get involved when it's something that should be handled by your people. Instead, focus on the greater vision. You as the manager, you need to look at the bigger picture. If you're the business owner, you need to back up. And if you're so used to, from habit, having your hands in everything, as I said, your fingers in all the pie kind of thing, you need to develop a new habit. And then you will delegate, you'll back off, and now you can have to redefine how you spend your day. And maybe it's spent in greater strategic methodologies where you're doing more planning, more viewing of the business from a 30,000 foot view, as opposed to right up close on every little detail. Now, there's nothing wrong with getting involved once in a while. And as the Japanese say, genshi genbutsu, which is to go and see, to visit the front lines, to visit where production happens and observe what is happening. But do it, like I said, as a fly on the wall. Make notes, and then take your people aside, the people who report to you directly, and communicate with them. And maybe, there were several layers of management or in the hierarchy of your organization between the front line and you. And so you meet with your people and you describe what you observe. Also, part of the Genshi Genbutsu practice is not to just observe, but also to ask questions. And then the person, you'll gain intelligence by doing that. The frontline person who's doing something a particular way, you'll gain insights by asking why they do something in a particular way. Oh, I noticed this. I noticed you have this tool. I noticed that you've set things up in this particular way. Can you tell me what the benefit that is from your perspective, or whatever, and non-judgmental. So that's not micromanagement. That's attention to the details and being aware of what's going on in your organization, but allowing it to occur. And then where you need to steer the ship, where you need to write things and tap it back on course, you can meet privately with your people and coach them and remind them, hey, I want you to push back. That's another really important thing, is you want to give your people permission to stand their ground and push back if they disagree with you. Do you have a culture where it's like, no, we all have to acquiesce to whatever the boss says? You don't want that. You want the power of everyone, the cumulative effect of all of the resources, the brain power, the intellect, the knowledge, the specialized skills of your entire team. And when you've got a culture where everybody's terrified of the boss and everything this boss says goes and everything, and the boss is responsible for solving all the problems and dictating, mandating exactly how things should unfold, you're really stifling your organization's productivity and ability to innovate. And like I said before, creativity. These things are not always obvious to you. And it took me quite a while in my career to notice that I was a micromanager. And because at the beginning, I just took pride in it. I thought what I was doing, I was effective. At least in some regard, I was effective insofar as you could measure my performance versus some of the competition, and we were doing very well. But if you step back, you can also say, yeah, but could you have been more effective? Could you have been beating the competition by leaps and bounds even more so than you were? So don't confuse just because, like this concept of if it's not broke, don't fix it. Sometimes you can still improve it, right? Just because it's not broke doesn't mean it's not a little bit broken. It's not a binary. Remember, it's a scale. There's a spectrum, and things are good and bad, and we're always on a trajectory. We want to be on a trajectory from current state to desired state, and your desired state should always, of course, be better than you are today. I think that's where we're going to leave it for today. I'm curious if you're a micromanager or not, and I want you to think about these things. Ask other people in your organization if they think that you micromanage. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Leave some comments that we can all benefit from, because we have to learn from one another. Perpetual refinement.